my stupidly easy guide to learning words for people that are trying to learn words in a foreign language and are finding it a little bit difficult. So I'm going to explain the input repetition method. I have already talked about this before, but I've kind of refined the process a bit. So here is what I've learned and how you can implement it. Basically, the input repetition method is my system of learning new words in a foreign language, and the reason I use it is because it's extremely fast compared to some other ways, and it's also very, very efficient. It's very fun as well. It's actually quite fun to do. And I think the reason this is really important to talk about is because most people are really, really bad at learning words in a foreign language, and they don't know what they're doing. They get frustrated because it's not fun and they're not making progress, and none of that is good at all. So here is actually what you should do to do the input repetition method to learn words. So first you need to actually encounter words. So what we're going to do is we're going to consume content extensively. So by consume content, I mean anything that you could read or listen to. So it could be reading books, Wikipedia pages, practice paragraphs, anything with reading, or listening to a podcast, an audiobook, watching a vlog or something with subtitles. Could be TV or movie if you're a bit more advanced. Anything like that where you're actually reading or listening to something, or watching, I guess, but technically that's reading or listening. And we're going to do it extensively. What the word extensively means is that we're doing it without paying, we're not laser focusing on the word. So if you were doing, the opposite of extensive is intensive. If we were reading intensively, we'd be focusing on every single word and the meaning of it, kind of like if we were making a list of words we don't know, or if we were reading a contract. Extensively is just listening or reading for pleasure and kind of getting an idea of what's going on without intently focusing on every little part of it. And I think that's really important because what a lot of people try to do when they read, for example, in a foreign language is they focus very intently on every word. And as soon as they encounter words they don't know, they instantly get derailed and they actually don't make much progress, which is really bad and it is not fun as well. So let's try and avoid that. Once you've consumed the content extensively, so ideally not a really big piece of content, potentially a chapter or a few pages or a 10-minute video, etc. What we're going to do is we're going to reconsume part of that content, or the whole thing if it's small enough, and we're going to make a list of unknown words. So for example, if you were reading Harry Potter in Russian, you could read a couple pages and then you could go back through it and make a list of all of the words you didn't understand. And yeah, we're going to do that intensively. So when you reread it, you would be doing it intensively because you're trying to make a list of words you don't understand. Here's where the repetition part of the input repetition method comes in. After you've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to put that list of unknown words into flashcards. And we're going to use digital flashcards and we're going to use Google Translate to figure out what those words mean. Unless you have a parallel text available, but just be careful with that. And obviously, with listening, it might be a little bit more difficult, but just try and use subtitles or a transcript to help you. And then once we put it into flashcards, we're basically going to memorize that. And we're going to talk about that a bit more on the next slide, how you can actually do that. But we're basically memorizing the words and then we're reconsuming the content again. So you would reread the page or re-listen or rewatch the video and you would have an enhanced understanding of what's going on because you have learnt the new words. Even if they're only in your short-term memory, by reconsuming you will help put those words into your long-term memory and you will be more proficient when you're actually reconsuming because of course you've learnt the words. So that is the input repetition method, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about some bonus tips and tricks, and it's a really useful way of learning because one, you can consume content you enjoy. Two, you learn words quickly and you don't forget them because you're not only are you learning them with flashcards, you're also locking them in by reconsuming the content and by teaching your long-term memory that these words are important. And then three, overall, it's just a very streamlined process. I think a lot of people kind of bounce around doing flashcards and forgetting stuff and looking at random vocab lists, when in reality, the process of learning things is quite simple. Until you've taught your long-term memory that new information is important, you're not going to remember it, and that is exactly what this process does. So now that we've outlined that, let's talk about a few different things. As far as content goes that you should be consuming, it should ideally be stuff that interests you a little bit so you're actually motivated to do it, and also at a comprehensive input level. So comprehensive input, if you are unfamiliar with the term, which I know a lot of you are, but I'm just going to define it anyway, is basically content that's not so easy you can understand basically everything, but it's not so difficult that you don't really understand what's going on. So it's at a level where you can get a gist of what's going on without actually understanding every single point. And that's really good because if it's too easy, there's not enough to learn. And if it's too difficult, it's you can still make progress, but it's so detached that you won't make as fast progress. You basically want a stretch and not a strain as far as learning goes. And for things that you can read, there's a list there. I've already mentioned them all. You can literally just read Wikipedia if you have nothing to read about on an article that interests you and translate the words, because Wikipedia isn't that unreliable as far as information goes. It's fairly reliable, but we're not reading for information. We're reading to learn words and just because it's interesting. As far as reading intensively goes, I think that's what's written there. There's something covering it, sorry. Don't worry about not knowing words. Every time I think a lot of people, when they encounter words or unfamiliar things in a foreign language, they get really frustrated because they immediately see it as a threat. It's something they don't understand. What I want you to do instead is every time you encounter a word you don't understand or something that's difficult, see it as an opportunity to improve. Because after all, you can't improve in a language if you understand every single thing you're seeing. You probably haven't really learnt much English watching this video because you understand, the vast, maybe you didn't understand what comprehensive input means, so maybe you did learn something in English. But you're not really learning anything. Whereas in a foreign language, when you're encountering words you don't understand, every single word you encounter that you don't understand is an opportunity for learning, and that's what we're after all. We are looking for opportunities to learn. Also, I'd say remember to take advantage of parallel text, subtitles, transcripts, anything like that could help with the translations. Google Translate is not always 100% accurate, and the reason for that, I'll just give you a quick bonus tip on Google Translate. When you translate a word in a foreign language, for example, if you're translating, you just find a word in a book that you don't know and you need to learn it, so you translate it, you put it into Google Translate and you translate it from Russian to English. That's a random example. What will actually happen a lot of the time is it will translate the word to English, but it will not tell you the context. So if you're looking at a word that, some words, for example, are spelt slightly differently depending on where they are in a sentence, like some words, hypothetically, if a word's at the end of a sentence, it might have an extra letter in it that it doesn't normally have. And Google Translate won't tell you that. It will only translate the word to its normal word without telling you the context. So that's why it's important when you're using Google Translate to take whole sentences and, the context and put them into Google Translate so that you can actually understand, is this word, is it a plural? Is it spelt this way always? Is it changed particularly because of the context, etc. It's hard for me to explain that because I don't know the particular language you're talking about, but I'll just give you an example in a second. Before we talk about that, I'll just say that the relationship between words is extremely important. So a lot of the further you get from your native language, the more difficult it is to translate words word for word. And you'll probably understand this if you're a native English speaker and you're learning a European language like Italian, French. You'll know that a lot of the time you can directly translate the word and it gives you a direct English counterpart. Whereas the further you go away from English into, for example, Asian languages, Arabic languages, you get more of the kind of filler words, more of the particles, more of the sayings that don't make sense, more things that don't really translate directly. And what you actually have to do is understand the relationship between words to understand what's going on. So I'll give you an example of what I said before, of how words can change depending on context. If you don't speak Italian, I'm just going to teach you something really quickly, but it's quite a simple example. So if we take, for example, see where it says l'uomo alto next to example, that means the tall man. It literally means the man tall. They just put the word alto, which means tall, afterwards. So the tall man. And then we have la donna alta, which means the tall woman. But as you can see, the word alto and alta are different. They both mean tall, but the ending changes, and you might be wondering why. Well, the answer is context. When we're talking about something masculine, like obviously a man, the ending is O. When we're talking about something feminine, the ending is A. But of course, if you copied that word alto without knowing it into Google Translate, it would just tell you the word means tall without telling you the context. And so if you encountered the word alta, you would be like, is this a spelling mistake? Is it a completely different word? When the answer is actually, it's the same word, it's just different context, and that's why it's different. So make sure you are taking whole sentences and putting it into Google Translate, and also make sure you are doing a bit of grammar research to understand how the grammar of the language impacts specific word types. If you know, for example, that that's an adjective, and you know, for example, that Italian changes the ending of adjectives depending on the gender of the word, you'll be a lot more set than someone who doesn't know that and has to kind of rope learn why the ending of words change. So yeah, don't trick yourself, copy chunks of text in context into flashcards. I've found that can be good as well, rather than only copying individual words. You can do a mix of individual words and like phrases, chunks, etc. I will also say try and practice passive and active recall with words. So when you're doing flashcards, right, Passive recall is when you look at the side of the flashcard that's in the foreign language and you try and translate it to English or your native language. Active recall is when you're looking at English or your native language and you try and translate that to the foreign language, which is a little bit more difficult because it's harder to kind of do it that way. So make sure you are doing both, particularly active recall, because that is what a lot of people are underdeveloped in. And you'll find that when you do both, you're actually way more developed as a language learner. You're able to translate from one language to the other and the other language to the other way more efficiently, and it's just better overall. And also continue reconsuming the content. You don't just have to reconsume that page that you learnt words from. You can reconsume other related content, and you'll find it actually helps you lock those words into your long-term memory because you're teaching your brain that this new information I'm learning is extremely important. But yeah, that is effectively the input repetition method. If you have any questions, comment below. If you want to check out the Language Learning Accelerator, that's my course for beginner language learners. And yeah, have a good one and subscribe.